Hi, thank you for watching Digging into China. I'm Dong Shong. The Chinese Communist Party, aka CCP, is the ruling political party of modern China, officially known as the People's Republic of China. The CCP has maintained a political monopoly since its founding a century ago. As the party marks its 100th anniversary in 2021, it faces challenges abroad and at home, including economic inequality, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the environmental crisis. Since President Xi Jinping came to power in 2012, he has consolidated his control over the CCP, with many experts calling him the most influential Chinese leader since Mao Zedong. In 2017, the CCP reaffirmed Xi's dominance and elevated new officials to support him in setting the agenda for the second largest economy in the world. Xi has pursued a more assertive foreign policy strategy, which has increased the tensions between China and the United States and its allies. Inspired by the Russian Revolution, the CCP was founded in 1921 on the principles of Marxism-Leninism. Tensions between the Communist Party and the nationalist Kuomintang, its primary rival, erupted into a civil war won by the Communists in 1949. Despite market reforms in the late 1970s, the modern Chinese state remains a Leninist system, like those of Cuba, North Korea, and Laos. The party relies on three pillars: control of personnel, propaganda, and the People's Liberation Army. As the armed wing of the CCP, the PLA's main objectives include protecting the party's rule and defending the party's interests. The CCP's Central Military Commission, currently headed by Xi, oversees both the PLA and the People's Armed Police, which primarily focus on internal security. According to a 2020 U.S. Defense Department report on China's military, the CCP sees the PLA as a practical instrument of its statecraft, with an active role in advancing the PRC's foreign policy, particularly with respect to the PRC's increasingly global interests and its aims to revise aspects of the international order. For example, the PLA oversees the deployment of warships and aircraft near disputed areas of the East and the South China Sea, as well as near Taiwan. Over 70% of the CCP's nearly 92 million members are men. In 2019, however, more than 42% of new members were women. Farmers, herders, and fishermen make up roughly 30% of its membership. Every 5 years, the CCP convenes its National Party Congress to set major policies and select top leaders. This is not to be confused with the National People's Congress, which is China's legislature. During this time, members choose the Central Committee, which comprises around 370 members and alternates, including ministers, senior regulatory officials, provincial leaders, and military officers. The Central Committee acts as a sort of board of directors for the CCP, and its mandate is to select the Politburo, which has 25 members. In turn, the Politburo elects through backroom negotiations the Politburo Standing Committee, which functions as the epicenter of the CCP's power and leadership. The Standing Committee currently has 7 members, but the membership has ranged from 5 to 9 people. Xi, who took over from Hu Jintao in 2012, sits atop the system as General Secretary. He is also the president and head of the military, exerting enormous influence in setting government policy. The Premier Li Keqiang heads the State Council, China's equivalent of a cabinet. Party leadership is decided through secret negotiations. Some experts split the CCP's power structure into 2 distinct camps: the princelings, the children of high-level leaders, and the Tuanpai, those who came from humbler backgrounds and rose to power through the Communist Youth League, such as Hu Jintao. Other experts, such as Claremont McKenna College's Ming-Hsin Pei, see a more complex power dynamic built from personnel alliances and factional loyalties juggled among three groups: retired leaders, incumbents, and the incoming elite class. These complex dynamics can be seen in Xi's extensive anti-corruption campaign, which began in 2012. While corruption crackdowns are not uncommon following a transfer of power, the scope of Xi's campaign has been unprecedented, targeting some 2 million officials, including high-level officials or tigers, senior military figures, and lower-level party cadets or flies. Experts say the anti-graft movement, though extremely popular among Chinese people, could alienate some elite and paralyze governance at lower level for fear of falling under the party corruption watchdog's suspicions. In the reform era that followed the death of Mao and his personality cult, Deng Xiaoping steered the party from strongman rule to consensus rule or collective leadership among the elite and institutionalized the transfer of power from one leader to the next, with each president serving a maximum of 2 5-year terms. These principles had dictated the leadership succession since the early 1980s. However, experts say the CCP has moved back toward a strongman rule with the elevation of Xi. If the 18th Party Congress in 2012 marked the peaceful transition of China's leadership from Hu to Xi, then the 19th Congress in 2017 solidified Xi's ascent as a decisive leader. In March 2018, the Congress amended China's constitution to roll back term limits for China's president, paving the way for Xi to remain officially in power beyond 2022. Experts on modern China caution that relying on a single leader to navigate the reforms could threaten the ruling party's survival. In recent decades, global events and internal strife have tested the CCP. The 1989 Tiananmen Square protests and the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s triggered a series of existential crises for the party that forced it to reconsider its mandate. The Soviet implosion in particular pushed the CCP to examine the causes of regime collapse and institute intra-party reform to avoid a similar fate. It determined that an ossified party state with a dogmatic ideology, entrenched elites, dormant party organizations, and a stagnant economy would lead to failure, according to David Shambaugh's 2008 book, China's Communist Party. Since the 1990s, the CCP has shown a technocratic capability to respond to the developmental stresses brought on by China's dizzying economic rise. Today, the party has harnessed the reward of globalization and economic development, lifting tens of millions of people out of poverty. The CCP has re-imaged himself as a driver of change, guiding the country's path to wealth and fueling a sentiment of national pride. Yet, fears of social unrest are persistent. Leaders share concerns that public outrage and activism over a host of issues such as income inequality, environmental threats, land grabs, food safety, and the lack of consumer protection could threaten the party's control and catalyze democratic social change. Many of the public's grievances have been brought to light on the internet, which has eroded some of the CCP's control of political communication despite being heavily censored in recent years. To counter threats to its control, the CCP has sought to further embed itself across layers of Chinese society and the economy. With Xi's encouragement, the CCP has done so by silencing dissent, including on social media, restricting religious groups, media organizations, environmental nonprofits, human rights activists, and lawyers, reining in the private sector and combating corruption. Still, actual governance of China can be extremely decentralized. Chinese provinces enjoy significant autonomy, and the sub-provincial officials and leaders appointed by the central government have almost total control over local governance. Policies can originate haphazardly in bureaucracies and ministries, within the committee, inside the National Party Congress, or from think tanks and advisors. While rapid economic growth has boosted the livelihood of millions, the CCP must also address massive income disparity. According to a 2016 study from Peking University, the richest 1% of households held a third of the country's wealth, while the poorest 25% owned only 1% of its wealth. China's economic growth, which has slowed since its breakneck double-digit growth in the early 2000s, has also been a point of concern for policymakers, who have called for reforms to increase domestic consumption and curb reliance on exports. In 2020, the Chinese economy grew by 2.3%, the slowest pace since Mao's death in 1976. However, China was the only major world economy to expand in a year dominated by the COVID-19 pandemic, if you believe Beijing's statistics. Additionally, the massive accumulation of debt has some experts concerned about a looming debt crisis. Chinese stock market volatility also raised questions about the party's ability to implement proper economic reforms. In response, Xi has worked to boost the CCP's control of both state-owned and private companies. In September 2020, for example, the CCP issued new guidelines to boost party supervision of private firms. At the same time, China's industrialization has come at the environment's expense. In the past decade, China has emitted more greenhouse gases per year than any other country. Air pollution, water scarcity, and soil contamination threatens the health and the livelihood of Chinese people. Separately, China's aging population will test the party's ability to provide for its people. Estimates suggest that the retirees could account for more than 40% of China's population by 2050. Moreover, life expectancy has increased while the birth rate has declined. Recognizing the problem, the CCP announced in 2021 that it would allow married couples to have 3 children, ending a 2-child policy in force for most couples. Broadening insurance coverage has also been a major initiative for the party, with healthcare expenditures increasing from 3.5% of GDP in 1995 to 5.4% in 2018, according to World Bank data. And the researchers project that number will rise to 9.1% by 2035. While medical insurance covers more than 90% of the population, coverage is often limited. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly.